This discussion will be about what is a pigment and how it relates to photosynthesis. So what exactly is a pigment? A pigment is, to be correct, a chemical compound which reflects only certain wavelengths of visible light. Now, what's the function of the pigment? Well, initially, it's what they say. They absorb light in the form of photons, and in the case of chlorophyll, they only reflect green. They absorb all other lights of the spectrum. So, there are two parts of chlorophyll actually. First part is chlorophyll A. Chlorophyll A is the process of passing energized electrons onto the molecule which create glucose. Now, glucose, as we know, is a prime endpoint of photosynthesis, a primary byproduct. Now, chlorophyll B basically is similar to chlorophyll A, or photosynthesis B and photosynthesis A, as other people like to call it, but this is only present in green algae. Now, in the green algae, this is when it only put in green algae, and in fact, there's also maybe considered a chlorophyll C, which is presented in dinoflagellates. Now, what's important to note is that the primary one is chlorophyll A, and the secondary one, in fact, is chlorophyll B. So now let's move on to the next part. Next part is about how does it really work. Now, light is a photon of energy, which a packet of energy, protons and electrons. When it hits the pigment, as shown in this diagram right here, when it hits it, it shoots off, but leaves an electron. Now, what happens with this electron? The photosynthesis begins once it hits. This electron goes through the electron transport chain in the thylakoid membrane. Once it exits it through, much like what we see in the cellular respiration, it actually shoots out H+, creating water, and goes through the ATP synthase once more, creating ATP. However, what's a key difference to note is it actually goes to the reaction center. And this is when all the little parts creating energy actually occur in photosynthesis. Now, basically, to summarize this portion is, when the photon is processed by chlorophyll pigment, the electrons travel to the reaction center through the electron transport chain, much like cellular respiration. It's a whole process that's completed through this extraordinary event. Now, another thing to note is the reaction center. What does it actually do? The reaction center actually functions through the process of photosynthesis through all the cells around it. These are different chlorophylls, and this is the reaction center. If light hits this one, light hits this one, light hits this, light hits this, light hits this, and light hits this. All the processes go into the reaction center, which ultimately leads to creating of glucose as a byproduct, water, and oxygen, and O2. So, let's review this. What we first saw was pigment, how it relates to photosynthesis. Well, pigments are molecules that reflect only certain wavelengths of visible light. How is it related? Chlorophyll is a greenish pigment that's necessary for the plant to go through photosynthesis. This is the pass of energized electrons onto the molecules which create glucose. Now we also learned that there are two types, or maybe three possibly. Chlorophyll A is a process of energized electrons. Chlorophyll B is only green algae, and chlorophyll C, shown here, is actually dinoflagellates. And we learned that primary one is chlorophyll, and chlorophyll B and chlorophyll C are the secondary ones. And then we move on to discussing about how it all relates to the reaction center. When the light hits the pigment, it actually creates the photosynthesis to start. And through photosynthesis, as is shown through this diagram, light, the energy electrons pass through, going into the reaction center. And this is where glucose, water, and O2 are generally produced. And this is what photosynthesis is.